Si hei Māori ora, kia tiki nātu te Māori o te ata I tēnei rangi. Te urunga tū, te urunga tapu. Te Māori tū, te Māori tapu. Te Māori te whiwhia, te Māori te rawea, te Māori nōhea. Te Māori nō runga, nō rangi, nō nuku tū, tēnei te Māori ka whakapiki. Tēnei te Māori ka whakakake. Tēnei te Māori nō nā tipua, nō nā atua. Nā rangi I whakaputa ki te whai ao ki te ao mārama. Uhi, wero, tau mai te Māori haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Kei ngā mana, kei ngā tapu, kei ngā ihi, ngā whakamataku, o tēnā o ngā paparahi, Amerika ki te tonga. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. Whakatau mai ki tēnei hui ahu rei, e wānana nei tātou I tēnei ata. Ngā tapu, ngā ihi, koutou ngā rangatira, ngā tohunga, ngā kai whakaawe awe, koutou e arahi nei te ao auaha, I te ao rangahau. Tēnei te mihi o mātou mātua tīpuna ki a koutou. Nau mai me ngā tini mate, kei runga I a koutou, ngā aitua, kei runga I a tātou, kia tūtakitaki rātou I tēnei rangi. O tia, kei te mihi ki ngā mate huhua, kei te puta I te ao. Te rā ngā mate I runga I a Ukraine, kei atu ki ngā tāngata o Palestine, ngā whenua I reira, ngā te hunga e mate ana I reira. I tēnei wā, tēnei te Karakia atu ki o mātou atua, kia whakatata mai I tēnei rangi. I te whakamutu I nei mahi, I te kōhuru, I te whakamate. Tangata, tāne, wāhine, tamariki pēpē. Hoi anō ko te wawata, ko te inoi, kia tata mai rātau ki te whakamutu I tēnei mahi, te pakanga. Kia tauiho ko te AIO ki runga I a tātou katoa. Koe rā te wawata. Ākene pēr mā tātou mahi rangahau. Ka pue ake tēnei āhua ki te whakatō mai I te AIO ki runga I ngā whenua e haukerekeretia nei e te pakanga e nā mahi atu matauenga. Hoi anō, kei te mihi ake ki a Marcos, koe ia te kaiarahi I tēnei rangi. O tira ki tō mātou hua ki a Sergio, I te rā o nā paparahi ki Amerika ki te tonga. Nau mai ki te hui rangahau e hono ai tātou, me tā tātou puka hoki a Toiroa kōtui. Kei reira nā tuhituhinga rangahau, nō reira kei te mihi hoki ki ngā tāngata e tuku kauhau nei I tēnei rangi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Can I just begin by saying welcome to everyone, particularly the people who are going to present today. Welcome to our conference. And in my language, I welcomed you and all of your ancestors and people who have died recently so that they will mingle with our ancestors today. I welcomed also the notion that there are many people who are dying all around the world at the moment. We pay homage and tribute to them, particularly to the people who are dying from the hostilities in the wars in Ukraine and in the Palestine. And I fervently prayed to our gods that they come near us to put an end to these hostilities and these killing of men, women, babies, children, and hope that peace will reign and that all wars would stop. I know it's idealistic, but it is our fervent wish from this end of the world, and we pray that it never comes to our part of the world. I pay tribute also to Sergio and to Marcos, who are helping to coordinate this conference. And I wish you all and everyone the best for these deliberations over the next few days. Kia ora.
It's a pleasure to have everyone, especially after this beautiful entry. Thank you so much, Matwa. So let me share my presentation so we can start. So it's after COVID, everybody became really fast on these things. Not me. Okay, it looks like this and this. Tiago, can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect, Marcos.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm going to start our presentation, which is Mai Tawhiti, a research collaboration in Aotearoa, New Zealand, between a Māori and a non-Māori practitioners. My name is Marcos. I am one of the founders of Link with Sergio and Robert, and I'm from AUT here in New Zealand from the Communication Design Department. And my colleague who is going to co-present with me, the wonderful Toiroa Williams from AUT as well, from Te Araputama. So my academic background started back home in South America, in São Paulo, Brazil, with some of my colleagues that are here. Oh, sorry, I think I jumped some slides here. Yes, so sorry, guys. It's very nervous for me to open the fifth conference. So the best is to do some mistakes in the beginning so we can get into the mood. So starting, so welcome to Link 2023. This year our theme is the diasporic stories. I was noticing something was wrong in my presentation. So this fifth link, after 5 years we are organizing this, this year we are focusing on the influences or the diaspora of Latin America in New Zealand. You will see the majority of the speakers here today are people from Latin America, more particular from South America, that choose New Zealand to be home, with the exception of my great Herbert, that is starting his diaspora now, although he was a diaspora in US already. So we continue our footsteps from previous editions to advocate of researching design at a global south perspective. And I know global south itself encapsulates a series of conceptual issues, so forgive me, my good friend Alfredo, that always call my attention to not use global south, sorry. So I just want to acknowledge the people that helped and created Link, and for these 5 years uninterruptedly has been working on this, which is my colleague, Professor Sérgio Nesteriuk from AMB Morumbi in São Paulo, from CAPES as well. And of course, we couldn't do anything without our guidance, our mentorship from Dr. Robert Pulfrey, our Kaumatua of Link. So I want to thank you, my colleagues, who have been in this journey for so long. And Sergio facilitating things back home, back in South America, back in Brazil, and Robert guiding us through this complex challenge of a bicultural society. So I just want to call attention for Link for this year. So on the day one, we have these speakers: Tatiana Tavares, Janaína Moraes, Priscila Bessen, Herbert Spencer, Rodrigo Hill, Marcos Steagall. And Rodrigo, although he's a photographer, he has this document picture that I always call his attention. We also have tomorrow, on the beginning of the second day, a group of researchers researching with practice lead from Waikato University. So it's a pleasure to welcome Rodrigo, Karin, Declan, Alberto, and Javier. And on the second day, we have Moira, Aline, Ana Camargo, Ana Lori, Diego, and Raul as our speakers. So please follow the presentations in our website, which is linksymposium.com, so you can find all the details for the presentations there. It's going to be extraordinary, really. The lineup that we managed to put together this year, it's fantastic. We're very excited. So yeah, we come through this. This is my presentation. This is the beginning of my presentation. So we're going to talk about partnerships between a Maori and a non-Maori practitioners at PhD level in academia. So this is me. I started back home. My studies initially in communication studies, in semiotics, where I did my master and my PhD. And in 2015, I moved to New Zealand to do my PhD in art and design using practice lead research. I'm associate professor here in the School of Art and Design. And our wonderful Toiroa Williams, he did also his bachelor in communication studies, his master of arts, and he did his diploma in oral Maori language because Toiroa didn't born with the real or the Maori language. So at a certain point, he felt for his PhD that was very necessary. He took a very difficult sabbatical year to immerse in the real, and now he's fluent in the real, something that we are very proud of Toiroa. And Toiroa just went through his examination, his PhD. Although we can't call yet Toiroa a doctor, we will be welcoming a new Maori doctor into the world very, very soon after the formalities of his examination and graduation. So we are very proud with Toiroa's achievement. And he works in Te Arapautama, which is the Faculty of Maori Indigenous Development, and he is leading the Maori media area. But watch this name, you'll see Toiroa as a great leader of this country, you'll see. So a little bit of our presentation today. It's a story about a research collaboration in Aotearoa between a Maori and non-Māori. So this presentation focuses on a collaborative partnership between Maori and non-Māori that challenges the concept of ethnicity and reflects the complexity of a globally multi-ethnic society. And funnily enough, we also in South America, we have a very multicultural society, especially if you're thinking about Brazil. Brazil, it's a mix of society. So I think our presentation can contribute to understand how these different minds, these different worldviews can come together and collaborate. And so the idea is to talk a little bit about that. And this presentation discusses how the shared conceptualization of ideas, immersion in different creative process and development over time can foster collaboration. So that's our idea to contribute here, to contribute to people that come from different cultural backgrounds, be able to collaborate and finding similar things to work together. Because this is a diasporic, and everybody should think, well, but I think it was a diaspora here, and it is indeed. So it's my diasporic story that started with these things here. So, and I will just like really briefly summarize my trajectory before I met the beautiful Toiroa. So a practice lead research in PhD. I was back in Brazil as a bureaucrat of education system. I work very closely with my colleague Sergio, and we were, we write degrees, we examine degrees for the Ministry of Education. We become very good on that things. We used to write degrees, and our projects, our courses always get 4 or 5, which is the maximum marking. At a certain point, I was really tired of doing that for so long, and I always heard about a practice lead research firm in New Zealand, and as a photographer of landscape, and I always thought, wow, how cool is that? Because I always, photographed it, but when it comes to do my PhD back home in semiotics, I wrote about stuff, and I always dream of the day that my creative practice, the way that I create things in this world, could be my contribution to knowledge. So one day, life got together in a perfect way, and I decided to move to New Zealand to do a PhD. The first time I wrote for here was 2012. I said, look, I'm interested on that. Some people wrote me back, said, well, come and have a look. Well, in 2015, I decided to close down everything back home, sell everything, and move to New Zealand to do my PhD. And I was pretty much looking for one of the biggest leaders in PhD in the world. And one of the reasons I came was Professor Wellbeings, who was my someone who supervised me, but more than that, he introduced me to the world of practice. And he also connected with my Maori scholars that will change completely my life forever. So after I started working with Welby introduced me to Maori scholars, which is Dr. Pulfrey and Professor Hinemata McNeil. And they, for some I was very lucky in my life, because I think my ignorance inspired them and they adopted me, I think. And I became, in some ways, familiarized with this universe of Maori idea and concepts. That was something that fascinated me from the first start. And I decided that that's going to be what I want to understand of the world, not the theories and philosophies that I have been reading all my life in the Western schools, but this new way to see the world from these traditional forms of knowledge that Robert and Professor Hinamato so kindly share with me. So I started in some ways to do partnerships with Maori scholars, and luckily enough, my first partnership was with Dr. Robert Pulfrey in his PhD. So I have some photographs that I will show, but I was invited to work with him documenting the beautiful land of Toiroa, which is the land of the children of the mist, the Tuhoi people, one of the fiercest warriors that New Zealand ever saw, and one of the most beautiful places in the world, very sacred place, Toiroa, the land of the Tuhoi. So I went there and I photographed it, and then later on I went to do a partnership with other Maoris. But what we're going to talk today is a partnership that I did with my colleague, almost a doctor, Toiroa Williams. So we're going to break down. Toiroa will help me to navigate through domains that I'm a beginner. And the idea is to tell how we collaborate together, how we brought these ideas together and how we work together, and how these end up as a photo-poetic installation, which is a concept that Toiroa is putting forward in his PhD thesis. So this was my thesis when I came here, and that was a part of one of the shots, and this is Desert Road, one of the most beautiful places in New Zealand that, you know, there's snow, and that day was particular day that we was going to be a tornado there. So we decided to go into the photographs just for exact. This is Professor Wings, who was someone who initiated me practice lead and introduced me so many scholars, and somebody who influenced of my thinking very much. And this is Professor Hinemata McNeil, that became like funnel for me, family for us. And this is the beautiful, wonderful Dr. Pulfrey in his very charming elegance here on the portrait. So the first partnership was with Dr. Pulfrey, and I was very lucky. Just a brief comments about Dr. Pulfrey or Robert. Robert is a hero in this country. He's one of the unique figures that battles against the disappearance of Te Reo as a Maori language. So 50 years back in time, he was beaten on the streets, collecting signatures to make mandatory the application of Te Reo in schools. If we probably, Robert, haven't done that in the past, we probably had not the level of language we have in this country today. And not only that, after that, he came Maori television, Maori radio. So the biggest advancements in terms of Maori language in this country was partly a contribution of Dr. Robert. And he is today one of the biggest linguists of Maori language, not only in New Zealand, but probably in the world. And he works with a very few groups creating new words for Maori language, like algorithm and these things. So the work of Robert does with culture and language is quite remarkable. So I just want to mention, when we see this beautiful photograph of this man, we probably don't understand what is behind his story. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge the trajectory and the value that Robert in his work has given to the Maori language, Te Reo, and New Zealand as a culture. So in his thesis, he talks about the Maori narratives, not like Disney, but from modularization, dislocation, and infantilization to veracity, relevance, and connection. So it's a one-of-a-kind thesis that talks about the Maori narratives, which is, Maui is the one depicted in Moana from Disney. But if you hear Robert's story, you see that the story is very different from here, and how colonization was a process to create children, infantilize Maori, instead of promoting the real value of the culture. So I was able to travel this country in one of the most beautiful places. This is Lake Karakia, one of the places that I have been photographing Toiroa, and I have been to places that I couldn't describe in words, and very sacred. Very few white people or Pākehā will be able to visit those places. So I had been in places that my memory will never detach from seeing those things, in places that very few people have been before. So this was my first collaboration, and I was just like, wow. You know, I have been traveling to Toiroa kind of few of times in the middle of this really rugged land. We see New Zealand as this beautiful place. We don't understand that New Zealand is a place that many people go and never come back. This is a very rugged outdoor, so it's not for amateurs, I would say. But the most important point that I want to bring for my presentation here is exactly the work that I have been working with Toiroa Arapeta Williams. So this is the beautiful cinematographic Toiroa Arapeta Williams that I had the honor to photograph in the studio. And Toiroa thesis is a quite extraordinary piece. He talks about a thesis that explores creative possibilities within the phenomenon of expandatory documentary making. But much more than that, Toiroa talks about in his thesis, Tango here, Mai Tawhiti, take this rope. Sorry guys about my bad Maori here. It talks about something very wrong that happened in New Zealand about 168 years ago, when land was confiscated in Whakatūhea, and the great chief Mokomoko was unjustly condemned and sentenced to death for something that never happened. It was just like economical interest to steal very valuable land and put people in poverty for more than 150 years. So and Toiroa talks about his thesis as a recover of this story, not only to understand, but beautifully to heal the past wounds from the past that, you know, they were too long on place. And Toiroa's work tried to accommodate this in his thesis. So I will lead here, Toy, and I will pass to you in the second part. And you jump in any time, Toy. You can open your microphone and stop and say nothing like this, and you can tell me if I'm doing something wrong here. So Toiroa's PhD is a praxis-led research project that inquires into whānau, which is similar to family in Western concepts, identity, belonging, whenua, which is land, and historical injustice. The study involves the conceptual and physical creation of a documentary of installed photographs, waiata, which are songs, whakatokis, which are proverbs, poetry, and whiumi motatea, which is traditional Maori chants that artistically consider connections between Chifi Mokomoko, whenua, and whānau. So, in working with Toy, we work at, let's quickly, we have been working together for 3 years already, and we started as strangers in some ways, and we started, you know, with a big respect, but also one of the things that when I was preparing this presentation, I was noticing our photographs working together, that although we come from very different worlds, I think one was very curious with the word of the other and very open to exchange the information about these two words. So during these 3 years, intensively working together, we developed a way to work together that, in my sense, even challenged in photographic domain the concept of authorship. Because when I see any of those photographs, I don't see myself as the photographer anymore, but in the same way he guided me through stories and landscape, I perhaps guided him in how we tell those stories through that equipment. So I think that was something very interesting. So we developed during these 3 years a journey that has to be built on trust. And at the end, when we look back, there's a couple of protocols that were so natural for Toy. But of course, for somebody ignorant like me, coming from a ignorant Western background, it was something very new. So I listed here some of these ideas or concepts that, although it's much more than this, and I don't want to simplify any complex notion that Maori has, it has a very complex understanding, but in some ways we borrow some of those ideas to build a way that we could work together and have some respectful approach that respects a little bit the traditional view of the place. So we were talking a little bit about that. But for you guys, perhaps from my perspective of understand that this audience might not be familiar with any of those. And it's probably people in New Zealand will be very familiar with these notions already. But I thought Toiroa could explain some of these concepts so we can start to understand how we work it. And these concepts are, I brought some here, and of course we can't isolate. One are intrinsically connected to the other. These things are part of a big understanding of Tikanga and Mautauranga Maori, but we, as a presentation, as an academic presentation, we try to bring some of these points for discussions, and perhaps in the aim of, how these partnerships, they can be possibly undertaken. So we talk about Karakia, Whakapapa, Whaikorero, Whanangatanga, Kanohi, Kite, Kanohi, and Purako. And there's so many others that probably while we go, Toy can explain a little bit here and there, not in academic words, but in the way that comes from the heart, in the way that comes from growing up, learning these things that are so new for us and so important that the Western world can understand the depth and the beauty of this very intrinsic form of intelligence. So, Toy, I will open for you the ground, mate, for you to put and come back anytime you like.
Tēnā koe, Marcos. O tira koutou katoa e hui hui mai nei. Tū tai ake me mi katika kia koe, Koro Robert, nā e whakatūwhera tō tātai nei hui. Me mi katika kia koe o tira tātou katoa. Just thank you all very much for being part of this presentation. And Marcos, you give me too much credit. I thoroughly enjoyed that. But what I can hear in there is it is true partnership and it is collaboration. And when I sit back and look and see the amount of work that has come together over these past 3 years, I think what kept us there was the kaupapa. And if I think of kaupapa, it's the reason we came together. It wasn't monetary, it wasn't outputs, it was simply to tell stories. And so how were we guided on this story? Well, it's been a story that's been there for over 150 years. And it was in these last few years, in these 5 years specifically, where to do a PhD on yourself is quite an unheard of concept. But naturally, for Te Ao Māori specifically, we know about our whakapapa or our genealogy back, well, essentially to the beginning of time. But I was learning more about that as an adult and in these spaces. So to see the institution and universities have a pathway that we could potentially follow in the practice-led. And I was trying to explain practice-led to my mum and my parents, because I come from humble beginnings. My mother and my father, they're hard workers in a small rural community. And I was the youngest of 4 boys, but a lot of firsts: first to finish school, first to go to university, first to do a master's, and of course, first to complete a doctorate. So I know that all of those accolades and accomplishments come because of them and what they have sacrificed to allow me to be here. My father always jokes, but to keep me up here, he would sell cows, simply to keep me, to make sure he wouldn't come home. I remember when they dropped me off, they're all like, right, you can keep him, no give backs. And all of those moments came back to me in these last 12 years of study. And so home was always the reason. I just didn't know what the story was. And I think these last few years, although it's only been 3 years with Marcos, it truly has been a lifetime of storytelling, because that's how long this story has been around. So with that, the context, we also believe in Te Ao Māori that nothing is by chance. And when we talk of spirit, mauri, all these elements within our world and way of being, I truly believe, and my mum believes, that the connection with Marcos and many others at home was all guided, some by, you know, the other world, the life after this, and that's why we connect to these concepts. And so Karakia was one of those first spaces. Some might think it's religion, some might think it's just a space to center to yourself and to be present, is probably an easy way for me to understand that. And then the next section, what that allows us is to give space to the reason we're being there, and connecting with everyone around us, and allowing us to complete the work at hand with the best intentions. Shall we go to the next one there, Marcos?
Yeah, can I play the video quickly from?
Oh yeah, and there's a video, and you'll see
so,
one of our relations. Yeah, you
so
tell us.
this is one of the video. Every place that we are going to photograph, it's a funny thing, because for me, oh, let's go there, see the light. No, forget all about that. Before we go and visit and we ask permission, we connect. And sometimes you don't even take cameras on the first approach. This was the whole initial thing. So this was sacred tree that we went to photograph in Aotearoa, the land of Whakatūhea. And it's a tree with more than 2,000 years, that on the back of time, Maori used to hang their dead as a natural form of burial practice. That has changed now, but back in time, Maori will tie their dead in the top of those trees to do the ceremonial burial. This is one tree that we have visited, and it says our ancestor. So it's anticipated by a Karakia.
E rā ki rā, te kore penui, te kore pero a te wāhi, awa te toitoi, awa whakamau e tamai te ara. E tamai te ara, ko wakatamau, ia ko wakatamau rā, oe atuku atu tamaka pita kitua i te tāwhanga, he putana reki narangu ki te atataui, rā mai ea. Mai ea, te tipua mai ea, te tawhitai hara mai koe, I whiai hara mai nā koe, I tū whakaatinuku, I tū whakaatirangi. Kato manawa ki taku manawa e tāne kairihia. Whāno, hara mai rā te tōki a haumie, hui e, tai ki e.
I'm just going to stop here, because otherwise you won't be able to go through the whole thing. Back to you, Toy.
Thank you, Marcos. And I just want to acknowledge our whanaunga Uenuku there, who has taught me a lot along this journey. And we went home a lot. We went to school together. And it was interesting how our roads came back together, and we reconnected through our kapa at Aotearoa Mai Tawhiti in Aotearoa, in the community that we grew up in. And it is another space where we can be authentically ourselves and learn these traditions of old that sometimes we have to find them on your whenua, to reconnect with it on the land that you grew up on. And so me mika te kia rātou, just acknowledging all these other types of universities that are within our communities. The next section that we're learning about is that genealogy, the connection, the layers upon layers that bring us here today. So when we think of whakapapa, you might think of the family tree, but specifically in Te Ao Māori, it's the layers that as you remove those layers, you go back in time, you're here today because of those before us. And so we're connecting to that. And it's through whakapapa that we reconnect to the songs, to the stories, to the carvings, and to the worldview, and essentially to this concept and this kaupapa, which is around the raupatu, which is around our iwi, which is around the injustice that happened to our ancestor, who was known as mokomoko. Now, I learned majority about my ancestor, our ancestor, as an adult, which is quite interesting for someone who grew up in Opotiki and went all to our schools in our community. It's from the same marae, but unfortunately, that's all systemic, and it's within the system not to teach it, simply because, well, to learn these stories would be, I believe, to empower us to take back what was unjustly taken away. We got the next one, please, Marcos.
Yeah, just before I think I have my thing showing for everyone. So before we move on, and one of the things that I want to comment is because for me as a Western thinker, when I arrive in New Zealand, when I think ancestor, I think about my family, my grandparents, and that's the beauty in Maori whakapaka. Because yes, you're thinking about your ancestor, but you think, where is the land? Where is the whānau? Or where they come from? Where is the whenua they come from? So whakapapa is not only about the people, but the places. My sacred mountain, my sacred river, my sacred sea, or my sacred lake, where I came from. And I think I never thought about myself as where we came from. And I think this is how we need to learn with Maori epistemology, because you can see how they intrinsically are connected to the environment that they are in. So that sense of respect, so they are parents, they are foster parents, and I will come back to that. But I just want to acknowledge that, because one of the interesting things that in our presentation, especially from my, again, ignorant Western point of view, is how Maori epistemology has deep levels of intelligence that are extremely required in the societies that we are on today. So I'm just moving for the next.
Kia ora, Marcos. Another concept is actually a key word in there, which is kōrero, or to speak, or to talk, and kia whai ngā kōrero, to pursue and follow the words and the stories and the reason for being together. And so it's a protocol within the Māori world that we follow, and it looks at speaking in te reo Māori about your reasons for being there. And why it's important to speak in te reo is because sometimes there isn't a suitable translation to what you're speaking about. And you can only find parallels or words that are similar to, but not quite exact. And I found myself speaking with Marcos many times, as he says, and as a second language learner of our language, and then with Marcos, a second language learner of English, we found ourselves negotiating and trying to find concepts within our different languages. And he'd speak in Portuguese with his beautiful wife, Janet, to find and should help him understand a concept. And so we were taking care with trying to understand key concepts, and we would use our own language in terms of te reo Māori and Portuguese to find the common ground where English could be suitable. Sometimes it wasn't. And sometimes we would share and speak with our tears, or speak with our hands, our hugs, our embrace. So an important element within any formal space of the Māori world, is to speak and speak to each other, with each other. Marcos? The next one you would have heard of, which is whanaungatanga. And the key word in there is whānau, and whānau being family, but not so much simply biological family, family in terms of people you'll go home to at night and under the same roof, who you see regularly, who support you, who help you, who care for you, who love you. Now, for Māori, whakapapa gives you your genealogy, but whānau and whanaungatanga and building those relationships and connections are, I believe, of equal status, because they're the people that are there for you and there for what you believe in. And it comes from those relationships of high trust that you build over time. And I think we spoke about that 3 years there, where Marcos had to come into the community, and we talked about face-to-face, which is kanohi ki te kanohi. One key concept was he needed to build relationships with whakatohea in our community, because you don't just bring strangers into your home to let them extract all your gifts and most precious elements, and the people don't know who they are. And so an interesting story on that is I took him home to see my beautiful mother, and everyone knows my mother as the lady who works down at the Aotearoa District Courthouse. And she's well known, and a spade is a spade with her. And the first time Marcos met her, he went to embrace her, and he felt the sharpness of her tongue, and he was sort of stopped in his tracks. But what she was doing was putting him through a process called the wero, I like to say. And there she is there with her big smile in her living room. And that's actually where Marcos sat when he came into our house. And Mum's house is like her marae. And a marae is a place of gathering where your values and your beliefs are at the forefront of what you do. And that's Mum's house. And so everything she holds value to is in that room, it's on that wall, but it's also where all her guests sit. And behind it, all her guests, where she's sitting, which is exactly where Marcos and Janet sat, we're all our ancestors. And everyone on that wall, you can only have a photo on that wall if you've passed on. And so they're looking after us, they're guiding us, and they're protecting us. And similar cultures have something of the same value systems. And so my mother connecting with him was us creating that whanaungatanga, creating that relationship. And it is truly something strong. And he whānau kotahi, and now we're family. Ka pai. Oh, you're just on mute, Marcos.
Yes, sorry, guys. So I just jump on the second part that I was going to progress. I learned the concept of whānau, which is slightly different from family, because for me, family was usually the people that has blood line with me. And I understood here that I had a family in New Zealand that I never met before, but I was adopted by these guys as part of their family. So now they became my own family. This is dad, this is brothers, these are family themselves. And as Toiroa talking about beautifully about, he's just finding here his mom. So this is probably the most difficult photograph I ever made in my life. And we have to take, it took only 3 years to make this photograph. We have to cut to try a couple of times. And this is a very special moment, because it was one of the most powerful women in that city. It's a very matriarchal society inside Māori society, and she is the leader in some way. She is the descendant of Moko Moko. And she calls this wall the Angel's Wall. And it's something very important. Like, we made this first photograph, we travel, we made this photograph, both me and Toy, we were very happy with the first photograph. And Toy came back and said, look, we need to redo the photograph again because there was missing one portrait. We understood that. And so these are things. And one very interesting things. Remember when I went there, it was a very special and spiritual moment that I met her mom. Her mom is not it's not everybody's friends. So she said, when I arrived, she said, you stop there, I don't come close to me because you might kill me. That was the first contact with Mom, and Toiroa can tell if it's true. I said, wow, that's full of love. And it took you only 3 years for me to get close to her. But once I got close to her, she understood that the thing was for good. And she gave us, for me and Janet, a gift and to protect us, which is a ponamo that she gave us on that particular day. I never took out. I wear it since then. And it's something to protect us, because although it seems a really nice story, there was behind that, there was the tree claim that was made, and the city went divided. In some ways, this was to protect us. And I never forgot that, to follow all the protocols. This is when we received that from her, and Toiroa has to bless it to start to work. So a ponamo is not something you can buy on the shop. It has to be gifted to you. It has to be blessed to you. So this is the day that Toy was blessing.
That's right. Just down at the beach below our home, which are the traditional ancestral lands of Ngāti Patu Moana, or the western side, that unfortunately was taken through the land conversation from government 157 years ago. And Mum and them brought a little farm out there. And it's this space where I chose to take those taonga down to bless and prepare them for Marcos and his wife. And as you said, yes, they wear them religiously and they shower with them and they keep them on. It's in the shape of a toki or an axe. And a special part that sort of prepared us for the rest of the trip. And just in that last section of building relationships, I just wanted to talk about how before we even had to pick up a camera, Mum told us we had to go visit some people. And I was like, okay, we probably want to visit a few aunties or some uncles in town. So I was thinking of preparing some lunch. But it was quite the opposite. And I should have known that, but we had to go grave visiting. And so Marcos and Janet came out and visited all my ancestors, the key ones who were on that wall. We went out to visit them. And it was also a good reason to go out and clean up the graves, because it was over Christmas and the New Year. And it was a nice way for me to reconnect with my whānau and our family, and then tell a story from my heart in the most simplest language to explain to Marcos and Janet, who had literally come from the other side of the world, who haven't heard this story before. And I was using language that was simple and that they could connect to, that wasn't taken over by the jargon of the academic world, but it was from a space of heart. And that's sort of how I wanted to centralize this PhD, is to go back to a space of heart, speak with your heart, and be guided by your heart. And to do that within the academic space with elegance, I suppose that's where the practice lead was so important, because you'll feel the heart within the exhibition and the installation, and you'll hear the words within the exegesis.
So just moving on, because I'm conscious of our time that's coming to an end, I want to show a little bit at the end. So in some ways, I think my work with Toiroa, it challenged the concept that I had before, like the authorship, when there's no single author. So the first time I understood what is a collective outcome of something. So these are some of the things. We work intensively together during day, night, spend hours trying to find the words to express things that wants to tell for each other. My English is terrible. Toiroa's Portuguese is known. My Toiroa is known. So we spend so much energy that sometimes at the end of the day we were tired and we just sit together without talking and have the pleasure of our silence. So we did that many, many times in these 3 years. And yes, we walked in places like the Lord of the Rings forest with 200-year trees. That's just like you feel with this, wow, beautiful thing. But we also share stories that are quite sad, like this, look, a beautiful place. It's a very sad story of a reservation, indigenous reservation, that people were marched away from their homes to a place they couldn't afford to get any food, to plant anything, useless land. This is the only case of indigenous reservation in New Zealand. It means they stole your home and they put you away in a place that you can even afford. So what they gave, poverty. And this is something that's still up to these days, the effects and traces of this bad doing years ago. And we work, like, I don't want to go not to play, but every place we come to photograph, it was always telling the story, feedback, to try to understand what we were recording there. And all the times, and this is a particular video that we use both Portuguese and English, so we talk in the language we could afford to this land, to this kaupapa that we're doing together. And I'm just going to jump out, and I really remember this day that, he was talking out, the pakia coming from the other side of the river. This is so, this was the photograph at the end. So it's a photograph created by these two. And I just want to jump out because I need to go. This was one of my favorite photographs in Toiroa's exhibition, because this was the tree that his placenta was buried 30 years back. So we went to visit in 2 cars, all family together, very moment, special, emotional moment. We went to have to pass through farms and places, because this sits in a place that you have to cross 2 or 3 farms, rivers, you name it, only 4-wheel drive. When we arrived there, I saw the tree and I felt it was that tree. And I pointed and said, that tree. And Toiroa asked his mom in the other car, oh, Mom, what's the tree? That tree. It was so special. I think it was so, to see that tree, that, it was, you can't really imagine a tree. It's just like, but, and the night wasn't nice that day. So I went back and Toiroa was looking for the tree. I made one photograph, and that was that. And that's this beautiful shape of a seed that comes from it. Means I was gifted with the image more than a photographer will take a photograph. And how cool is that? I remember that we were doing some photographs at night, and I used to send to Toy. When Toy wasn't with us, we usually take the photograph, send to Toy, see what he thinks. So how cool is that? He answered me back after a couple of years. You're becoming closer. Oh, these are your parents, your foster parents. So that night I came out. When I came in, I was a single man. When I came out, I realized that Makio, the mountain, and the river, you were my parents. How cool is that? You come back home with your 2 such important parents that day. So these kind of things that it's just like amazing. Okay, we're coming to the photographic part, and I think we just need to be very strategic here, perhaps show one toy.
Yeah, we're wary of time. And so this is all being pulled together into a photographic installation. And if you could just show one of the black slides, Marcos, to explain.
Sure.
So if we just show the photo. So we have a beautiful photo here, as you know, and then they speak of, and they're accompanied by one of these writings. One of them is done in Te Reo Māori, and then they have a parallel in English. And these stories, or pūrākau, are written with my understanding of what that image is trying to show and what story I'm trying to tell. It is then summarized, and I encapsulate what that image means in a proverb, as you would have heard before. And then in that proverb, I'm trying to bring knowledge that I was learning along the way about our tribes, ancestral knowledge, to bring back into proverbs. And then if you dig a little bit deeper, you can come to a QR code which talks about the stories associated with that image of me growing up on that land. And
Should I
the only
play
one
this
on 2
one,
minutes.
Toy? Should I
Yeah,
play one?
yeah, play one. That'll be great.
The Pippi beds, or as my brother and I would call it, where Pippies sleep. Every Christmas, we're down here. We'd go out with my uncle, we'd take our stolen New World baskets, and we'd jump in the water, and you know how you stomp on the ground to try and get the sand to move? Well, we're pushing all the sand out, and you can feel the Pippies in your toes, and we're trying to grab them with our toes, and you go from foot to hand to stolen New World basket, right? So foot to hand to stolen New World basket. And it's a whakataita, it's a race. And it's who can fill up these baskets fastest. Anyway, me and my brother, we get there, I win, I run them back to my mum and dad who are cooking on the barbecue. And then we find out we're cooking these Pippies. And then I make the famous whakatohea Pippi sandwich. I love Pippi sandwiches. And then suddenly, looking back now to those moments in time, I can see I was just free labor for the family barbecue.
So, yeah, I'm just going to run, guys. And what I will ask is, if you are interested, please put your name on the chat. We can send the catalog, a PDF with the catalog, so everybody can see all the images and hear the stories and see Toiroa's poetic writing, the whakatokis as well, because we are coming to an end and otherwise we won't be able to close. So these are some of the photographs and some of the poetic writing and the whakatokis for each image. This is a particular beautiful one. We just won't have the time. And I just want to wrap with a kind of story about something very important. So this is how usually me and Toiroa we work. We go on the day and we have an app and we imagine things, we discuss ideas. It's almost like a film script. And so what about if this sacred river flows into the sky through the Milky Way? So, okay, what's the time? Oh, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. So usually we work, and this is the photograph that resulted, for instance, from that study. So this is something that Toy and I will do constantly to make the photographs. And I just want to talk about this photograph because we made this photograph. It was in January, and it was a very important photograph for Toy because these two poles, they symbolize the friendship, or in some ways, the poles on the ground, as Toiroa used to call them, you know, a kind of relationship between Maori and non-Maori and Pākehā. And you can't see here, but Toy is here on the photograph because he's lighting the poles with a torch. So I was, you know, long exhibitions, and Toy was here lighting the poles. And I think that's why he found this photograph nice. It's a nice photograph. But I had another idea of this photograph. And I went back on the time because I have this idea of the Milky Way in between these two poles. And this was in August, it's winter. It was freezing outside. It was 2 degrees outside. I spent 1 hour to make those photographs because I have 6 photographs of 10 minutes each superimposed together to grasp because it's completely dark. And I was there, Chanichi was in the car, freezing with blankets. I was like 2 degrees outside. When I finished the photograph, I said, wow, wonderful. I got the image. And for something, I felt attracted to go and take a photograph from the beach. And I said, well, what am I going to do here? So I went down the beach. It was completely dark. I couldn't see a thing there. So I say, what I'm doing here? What I'm doing here? So I point my camera to the sea and to the sky. Can't see anything. I just put in the infinite, the focus of the lens because couldn't see a thing. Take 10 minutes photograph. Freezing. What I'm doing here? What I'm doing here? And then I understood what I was doing there when I saw this image. You can't see that, of course, in your naked eyes. This is. And then I said, wow, look at that. That's why. And I went out to the car, super happy. The next day, I was talking to someone that's very careful, both me and Toy, with Uncle Paki. Mm-hmm. And Uncle Paki told me, Marcus, you with your PhDs, you didn't understand anything at all. This is the land talking to you. Mm-hmm. And I was very pleased. I think this encapsulates a little bit our thing here, and I'm
Just
coming
to
trying.
add to that, Marcos,
Please,
what
please.
Uncle Paki was saying is if we think of the earth truly like our mother, and if we think of what the government was doing to essentially steal and take the land, well, they took our mother. They took our sustenance. They took our source of and ways of life. And when we were going back and we were asking the land, and sometimes we wouldn't get the photo. Sometimes we went home for a shoot and there was nothing. We couldn't pick up anything. But it wasn't, this was probably one of the last photos we took, Marcos?
Yep.
And it was about that connection with the land, and it's the Māori, or the life force of the land. And we truly believe in the concept of now the land wants to be photographed, and it wants to show you something, just as we've been asking it. It's showing that space, and it's speaking to us. And that's what Uncle Paki was saying in that moment. And when we heard it, it was he did it so, and just in a passing thought, but resonated so deeply with us. And I think we spoke about it in the 5-hour drive home. So yeah, tēnā tātou.
Yeah, just to finish, I would like to close with a Maori proverb that I quite love it. It's he aha te mea nui. He aha te mea nui. Maku e ki atu. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Which is, what's the most important thing in the world? Well, let me tell you, it's people, it's people, it's people. So when we understand people, you understand land as integral part of the people. I want to thank you here. The intelligence, the kindness, the patience of my colleague Toiroa that guide me with such a loving way. And I want to really say that I appreciate to be part of Whakatūhea tribe now. It's a very proud Whakatūhean that I became. Very furious if you say anything against them. So I want to thank you everyone for your presence here. So would you like to close before I introduce the next speaker?
Yes, me whakahoki e ngā mihi ki a koe o tira tātou katoa e whakarongo mai ana. Thank you all for listening. And Marcos, just acknowledging his space and his belief in Te Ao Māori, and his embracing of the culture. And to summarize, he summarized it very appropriately with Sir Apiranga Ngata's quote of what is the most important thing in this world. It is people. And if we think of people and us being a part of the land, because the land was here before us and the land will be here after we go, we return back to that whenua. And so what are we going to do in that time in between? And do that with a good heart for your neighbor. So tēnā koe, Marcos, o tira koutou katoa, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora toi. Thanks so much.